Hi everyone, I'm Christine Williams. My business is SmarterProperty Investing. I'm a property strategist and buyer's advocate, and today I'm going to share my hints and tips and strategies around investing in property because you can do it too. I can't wait to share this with Prosper Live Long recording today, and I'm sure you'll get a lot out of it. Stay tuned.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show, where we dive deep into the journeys of everyday individuals that are transforming their lives and the lives of others. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga, and today we're going to be exploring a story that provides not only the basis of what we should or shouldn't do when it comes to property management or property investment, but it is not about where you start, and it is really about where you are determined to go, because most of us are in the wavelength or the school of thought that only the rich are the people that are able to invest in property. Now, our guest today is ChristineWilliams, and she's the powerhouse behind SmarterProperty Investing and the Financially Fit Families movement. Now, Christine, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Prosper, for having me.
Absolutely. Now, Christine, obviously, before we get started, if there is anything that you just wanted our viewers to know with regards to the information that you're going to be talking about today on the show.
Today I'll be sharing a part of my personal story, but I suppose the hints and tips that I would be giving you will come from the lessons that I've learned along the way with my decades of personally being involved in purchasing, buying, selling property to create a property portfolio. So it's more about my story, how I've done it, and those hints and tips. People may want to take them, but I don't know anyone's personal circumstances. And at the end of this, my contact details will be there, and people will have questions, and I'm certainly happy to answer those questions from an individual perspective. But nothing here is set in concrete about this is exactly what you should do. It will just be a part of my journey and how I got to build a property portfolio. Yes.
Fantastic. And thank you so much, Christine, for that. And now that we've got the legalese out of the way, for those that are still hanging on, I just want you to know that Christine actually comes from humble beginnings, where she grew up in rental properties and caravans. And now she's become a renowned property strategist, and Christine has turned her own personal adversity into a mission to help others with financial freedom. And she does this through low-risk residential property investments. So in this episode, we're going to be uncovering how Christine's life experiences have actually shaped her approach to property investing and the strategies that she employs to build generational wealth, and how you too can get started on your own similar journey. Now, Christine, I could go on and talk about things I'm not even qualified to talk about. Your journey really starts, like I've elaborated earlier on, that it was humble beginnings where you were living in caravans to, now you've built this property empire, and it's very inspiring. Congratulations on that. Could you maybe take us back to those early days and share what it was like growing up in those sort of environments?
I can honestly say that I didn't have an unhappy childhood. We were very poor, but I didn't know that we were very poor. When we were in a rental home, it was a home, and sometimes that rental home we had to leave, and then we'd end up living in a caravan. The day that I actually got married, I was 18 and 4 months. I left the caravan, and that's, I left the caravan and I got married, and, I haven't lived in a caravan since. However, growing up, Mum and Dad worked. Look, I come from a very much a working family. Mum would work in a factory, Dad would be a truck driver, and they had 3 children. I was the eldest, and obviously times were tough. And with all of that, Dad come home one day and he said, there's an office job going where I'm working. I think you need to leave school. I was 15 and 4 months, and I left school. I loved school. I loved being at school. I loved numbers. I just loved everything about school, but I had to leave. And the reason I had to leave is because I had to financially help my family as well. So I go and get my first job in an office, and it was J. Gadsden's in Charles Street, Coburg, Victoria, Melbourne, and I earned $27 a week. $20 a week went to my parents, and $7 a week was mine. And in that, transport, lunches, clothes, that's what I had. So very early on, people were dictating where my money went. 3 years later, I got married, and that was wonderful. I had 2 wonderful daughters. We had a home, a beautiful home in Epping, but the marriage failed 17 years later. I came out with a small settlement, a very small settlement, and there was a lot of shame around. We left a home and I had to start renting. Now, it sounds really weird, doesn't it? Because I'd sort of come from caravans and renting, but I felt quite shamed when we had to sell the family home because of the divorce, and, how to be housed. So renting to me was shameful, and being a single mother, it was more about how am I ever going to be able to afford a home. I did rent in the same community where my children went to school because I didn't want to take them out of their community environment, and really that worked. And I really just thought that I had to earn more money to be able to borrow money. And so by this time I was obviously managing staff. I had got my accounting diploma. I was working very much in accounts and supervising team members at different businesses or different companies that I was working for. I went through the building industry, I went through the car industry, there was the steel industry. So I was always working around numbers. I was always working in the field of making sure the business that I was working at was making money. So numbers just worked with me. And I just thought, well, if I earn more money, if I get higher qualifications, if I get a better position, I'll be able to borrow money. So along the way, I read a book, and there was a book about, you can buy 130 properties in 3 years. Too good to be true? Definitely too good to be true. But it had some hints and tips in it. And I sort of thought, well, okay, I've got a bit of money here now. Let's go and buy something. So the first thing I bought was a shop, and it was actually a shop in Tasmania. It doubled in less than 2 years. And I thought, this is great. It's going to give me money for a deposit for a block of land to be able to build something. So I went and put the deposit on a block of land. That block of land doubled in 18 months. And I called my accountant and I said, what do I do? And my accountant said, there'll always be another opportunity. You just can't make money like this so quickly. So I let the block of land go. But then I actually thought, there's something in this. You can see that there's something in this. And so the next purchase was actually units in rural New South Wales, and they were really just a cash cow. It just worked. But along the way, I made mistakes. I didn't know about landlord insurance. I didn't know about the Tenancy Act. I didn't know my obligations as a landlord. I didn't know about speaking to the council about, was there something happening in the property? I got hit with enormous rates. I got hit with different duties and taxes that I didn't even know about. So the whole world of learning in the property world, I had to go and find out what to do. So I really went down the path of learning more, and in those mistakes, there were very good successes, and I suppose that's probably the thing that saved me. Yes, I have remarried. Yes, we've got a blended family. Yes, we've built together a property portfolio as well. But I suppose it was the lessons along the way that taught me what to do, together with teaching my own daughters when they become young adults what they need to do and how they need to prepare themselves. And I could see that property became this wealth creation tool. And once you understood the system and once you understood how you could borrow money, I never got involved really in commercial after that, buying and selling that shop. It was residential because I always felt that my need to have a property, my need to have a home that I went through in my life, there's obviously other people out there that can do it. And I suppose being a single mum and being able to do it showed me that you can do it. And the lessons I learned along the way was compromise. What was a not negotiable in a property and what did I have to compromise? And I didn't want to compromise lifestyle. However, you do have to give up some things, okay? But my not negotiables were making sure that if I was going to buy a property, I had to be willing to be able to live in it myself. And that meant that I wasn't going to buy a property where the toilet was outside, for example. There was no heating or cooling. And I suppose along the way, I taught myself how to be a really good landlord. So there were so many lessons. And with these lessons, friends and family would ask me, how are you doing it? What are you doing it? How do I do that? Where do I buy? And it really just became questions to me. And it would be, I'd share that information. And my current husband said to me one day, you should be doing this as a business. You should be teaching these people. So along the way, Smarter Property Investing was born, okay? And in that journey, it was more around sharing with people what I learned. I didn't really understand the value of what I learned. And it was a business coach that said to me, Christine, you should be charging for what you're doing. You have got so much information. Because I felt that my journey, although it was hard, I felt that everyone would know this stuff. Everyone would know how to do this. Everyone would know about stamp duty. Everyone would know about a deposit. Everyone would know about landlord insurance. Everyone would know about public liability. Everyone would know about the Tenancy Act. But along the way, I found out people just didn't know these things. So Smarter Property Investing was born, and it's where I share hints and tips and information and the strategy that I created. And the strategy that I created was around financially fit families. We're conditioned as children what money means to us. And some families, money is evil. Some families, money is quite good. But we're very conditioned about money from a young age. And financially fit families, to me, is more about, I came a long way. I came from a family where I had to help support at a young age, but my money was dictated by somebody else. And then I taught my children how to do that, and our stepchildren and family and friends. And so then I thought to myself, the information that I'm sharing and what I've learned can create a generational lesson of financially fit families. Because along the way, I not only have adults that are my clients, I've now got their adult children that are my clients. And then, of course, I have those adults, they've got parents that never had a home. And really, that's where I came from. And I'm helping the parents of adult children as well. So this business has become very generational, and that's where we created Financially Fit Families. And Financially Fit Families is around, this is not a buy and sell. This is not a flipping. This is a hold. This is a 10-year commitment to a minimum. And so along the way, I wrote a book, a couple of books about what the strategies were. Excuse me. And I have now fundamentally created a community whereby if I don't know the answer to something, I go and find out the answer, and then I'm happy to share that information. Of course, investing in property is a risk. Purchasing property is a risk. And what I try to do is mitigate and eliminate as many of those risks as possible, because they're the lessons I learned along the way. And one of the biggest lessons I learned was, in case of an emergency, something's going to go wrong. What can we have in case of an emergency? And of course, it generally comes down to a dollar figure. The strategy I have around there is everybody says to me, no matter who I speak to, no matter what their age is, what if I don't get a tenant? What if they trash the place? What if I lose my job? They are the three questions I get asked from absolutely everybody. Even though people may feel very confident and stable in their job, they worry about that. Or even if they think about they've got the best property manager, what if something happens to the tenant? Then they filter down to, what if I lose my money? What if I don't buy the right property? What if property goes down? So I have all those questions, I have all those fears, and they're normal. They're actually normal because I had the same fears. It was a risk. Am I making the right decision? What if I do lose my money? How is this going to go belly up? And I suppose it's one of the fundamental things I do with my clients is I get them to understand or bring to the forefront exactly what their fear is. And that fear I really put down to false expectations appearing real. And a fear is very intangible. We can feel something, but unless we can touch it, it's very intangible. And I create a very tangible dollar figure to that fear. What if I lose my job? Well, if you're learning $100,000 a year and you think, how long do you think it's going to take you to get another job? Oh, 3 months. Okay, well, that's $25,000. All of a sudden, what if I lose my job? It'll take me 3 months. That's all very intangible statements. But $25,000 is, whoa, $25,000. What if I don't get a tenant? Well, how long do you think before you wouldn't get a tenant? Okay, 3 months. I'm getting $500 a week. Okay, that's $6,000. What if I don't get a tenant is the biggest fear, but if I put $6,000 on it, it becomes very tangible. What if they trash the place? Well, actually, it's called landlord insurance. And if you take out the right landlord insurance, you are definitely covered. And that could be $2,000 or $3,000. All of a sudden, I'm thinking $31,000, $33,000, $35,000. Well, that's a lot of money, Christine. Well, yes, it is. But do you think those three things are going to go wrong all at the same time? But they could. Okay, well, you need a buffer, a cash buffer in case of emergency of $35,000. And if you have the borrowing capacity and or equity, and you can borrow that extra money and sit that money in a separate offset account, if those three things go wrong all at once, the fee is gone. So I learned along the way that I had to take an intangible fear, concern, and put it into a tangible number because I'm a numbers girl. And it allowed me to sleep at night because that's the next thing that my clients need to be able to do. If they sign on the dotted line and they are kept awake and they're so concerned and they've got this gut feeling and they know it's going to cause arguments if something goes wrong, they should walk away. Your gut is a very good feeling. But if you can sleep at night after you've done it, it just means that you've made the right decision because you've eliminated as much risk along the way before you do this, before you actually sign on the dotted line. And it's those lessons that I learned along the way that has helped me not only build my own property portfolio for my family, and my kids are doing the same thing, but it's helped my clients continually build and reinvest when they can. And so the 10-year commitment has a fundamental path in it: be free with 3 or thrive with 5. And, there's less than 18,000 people in Australia that have more than 5 investment properties. There's less than 18,000 people in Australia that have more than 5 properties. But I can assure you that there's a couple of million that have 1, and then there's a little bit more that have 2, and there's only a little bit more that have 3. Because fundamentally, they've found the right solution, they've found the right strategy for them, and they're comfortable in what they're doing. And if you've got 20 years to do this, it can be done. If you've got 5 years to do this, the strategy is very different, okay? And so people either come to me in their mid-40s because they think, I'm going to retire in the next 20 years. They've definitely got time. People come to me in their mid-20s and they want to start, and that could be where rent vesting comes into play. Rent where you want to rent, live where you want to live, so you rent there, but you actually purchase an investment property where you can afford it and it will actually grow in value. You can liquidate it and you've got a fantastic deposit for your own home. And then, of course, I have people that, close to 60 and they want to know, is it too late? And, I've quite often found that it's not too late. There will be a way around this in getting what they want as the end goal. It just takes time. And so time in the market is the most important thing, not so much timing the market. There is no such thing as the perfect property. There is no such thing as, buying the right property at the right time to give you the right increase. There's no such thing. It is a cycle. It's about you and your current circumstances, what your end goal is going to be, and how much time have you got as to what you actually need to do.
Absolutely. Now, Christine, we could just end the show right there, because I think that was just a very comprehensive, response to basically who you have become. And thank you so much for taking us through that elaborate journey. Now, let's just go back a little bit. Obviously you've covered a lot of ground, but let's just now put a bit of flesh to some of the stories. Now, you did mention you grew up in a sort of a semi-average household with a factory worker and a truck driver. And obviously at the dinner table is where normal money conversations would be happening, or maybe, while you're shopping or things of that nature. What was the actual money sentiment in your household growing up? Because so many people have not gotten that sort of financial education from the grassroots, like you have mentioned, and that then just,
conversation.
Yeah.
Our conversation was the lack of money. There was never enough money. There was never enough. And I can remember my parents, they used to make toffee apples, and that was sort of like a sideline. I can remember my father and my younger brother, they would go and fix trucks. I can remember Mum and I would clean kindergartens. There was always extra money coming in, but it was never enough. And I never really understood that. I never really understood why. However, regardless of understanding why, it's definitely where my parents gave me a very good work ethic. A very good work ethic. The three of us, we have got a very good work ethic. Along the way, I did find out why, and I'm not sort of going to go into that, but it wasn't until, it's only really been in the last 10 or 15 years. By the way, everyone, I'm 67. It's only been in the last 10 and 15 years having conversations with my brothers that I started to understand a little bit more around why, because I was the first person to leave home, and I was 18 and 4 months, and my two brothers, there's 2 years apart with both of them, they stayed there. So I now know why there was a lack of money, and it wasn't just because they weren't working enough. But in saying that, it was, as I said, I didn't really have an unhappy childhood. I just didn't know that there was so much more out there. And I suppose the conversation around our dinner table at night was, you're lucky you've got food on the table tonight. You're lucky that you've got, clothes and shoes to wear to school. But I can remember I had cardboard in shoes at one winter. You're lucky you've got a roof over your head, whether or not that be a rental property or whether or not that be a caravan. So we were grateful for what we had. And it wasn't until after I got married and got into the bigger world of working in different offices and with different companies, there's more out there. There's more out there. So it was probably after that the world opened up to me that I thought you had to work harder to get that way. And yes, there's definitely work ethic on my behalf, and I definitely learned that from my parents, and that was definitely one of the positive things that came out of that. But in saying that, I now understand that you don't just have to keep on working harder, as long as you find a vehicle that's going to help you to get to that financial goal that you want. And some people talk about retirement, some people talk about helping their elderly parents, some people talk about helping their kids get into the property market. Everyone's got a personal goal. So I suppose the conversation around the dinner table was to be grateful for what we had, and if you keep working, you'll eventually get something else that you want.
Absolutely. And the reason why I asked this is so many people would maybe look at your current scenario and circumstances and say, oh, I'll never be like Christine, or I'll never have that scenario because I wasn't brought up in a family that would have, supported me in that way. Now, looking at your track record and everything else that came along with that, you literally, subscribe to the notion or fit the bill of an everyday person who you've gone through just about everything else. You've been in the workforce, you've had to learn what you're learning, not necessarily that it was spoon-fed to you. You've been through, a divorce, so you understand what that looks like. You know what it feels like to be without, and you know what it feels like to not have control. Now, how has this perspective sort of influenced your approach in helping clients in their property investment journeys?
Quite frankly, Prosper, I think it's because I ask the right questions. And anybody, look, any of your listeners can go to a lender, find out how much money they can borrow, go on realestate.com and buy a property. Anybody can do it. Okay. Once you understand what your borrowing capacity is, and if you're working within that field, you may have a deposit, you may have your parents helping you. You go on realestate.com and you can buy a property. Anybody can do that. Well, that can be the biggest mistake. It's because people who do that are doing it because they think they have to do it, or they're trying to keep up with the Joneses, and they're making sure that, everyone's buying a property, so I've got to go and do it. It may not be the right strategy for them. But in saying all of that, those questions that I uncovered before, or the fears that I uncovered before from the questions I'm asking around their concerns, I truly do believe that is why I'm different to so many different people. It's because I have experienced all those life's up and downs. And I quite often say, been there, done that. I feel that because I have had so many personal life experiences, that can be generalised, but because I've experienced the emotion of the good, the bad and the ugly, I'm quite comfortable in asking questions. And when I ask the questions, I can either see through body language that I'm getting the answer that I need, or the client might feel, I can see that they're not telling me everything. And so I dig a little bit deeper. From a human perspective, from an empathetic perspective, and I suppose that's what really works with me. Because I've been there, done that, I have empathy, and it's true empathy. And so I can see whether or not this person is in a shame condition, or whether or not this person has been handed the silver spoon, and how they think they should react from that. Because I've gone from extremely poor to being quite successful. So I have walked the path of so many individuals, and I'm happy to share those stories. I'm happy to be quite open about what my experience is, and it tends to break down the barriers. So I feel my key, my magic is I have empathy, and from that, because I'm a numbers girl, I'm sitting there and my brain's working so quickly about, oh gosh, well I know you can do that, well I think you can do that, actually what if you did this? So no situation is the same. Every client I've got is completely different, but they may end up using the same strategy. We just come from it from a different space, because I've uncovered something that they weren't either comfortable verbalising, or they didn't even know that they had that internal fear. So empathy, I suppose, is my magic.
Absolutely. And I love that response, because so many people look at their story and they're like, oh, woe is me. Let me not, poke that bear, because these certain things are not meant for people like ourselves. Now, obviously somebody might also be watching this and thinking, oh, I probably just have one single income. I don't have the opportunity that so many people have maybe a dual income within their household. Now, you've also experienced that when your first marriage ended, and that's when your actual aggressive property acquisition actually really started, if I heard you correctly. And obviously there were significant financial challenges and lessons that were along that sort of journey. So now, for that person who's just looking at their situation saying, I'm a single mom, I don't think this is for me, how did you, maybe, looking at this period specifically, what were the lessons that you learned that you now pass on to your clients from, like, let's say, a female and a woman perspective?
I suppose the first thing we need to do is take out the word, I can't do this.
Right.
Because there may be, most likely, when a divorce happens and the family home is sold, it's because that's our law, that's the financial agreement, that's how it has to be done. In my book, I talk about one of the first financial decisions that you make when a marriage breakup happens. The worst decision you could make is actually trying to buy out your partner to stay in the family home. And the reason why I say that is it becomes very emotional. This is where my kids were born, or this is where my kids grew up, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. So there's this emotion around the family home. But holding on to the family home by buying out your ex, whether or not that you be the female or the male or whatever, it can be the worst financial decision that you can make, because you're at a point now, regardless of whether you like it or not, regardless whose decision this was, you now have to start again, and you have to start again at that level. And that level is going to be very different to where you were 10, 20 years ago. So in my book, I do talk about, if you do come out with a settlement, the worst thing you can do is have people around you telling you what you should do with that settlement. And I believe you should wait at least 12 months, because you are entering a new norm, and that new norm is going to be very different to what you've come from. And you have to really go through the new norm. And I think that takes about 12 months for things to settle down. Look, in some cases, it never settles down, but it takes about 12 months, for you to get back on track and be used to the new norm, your children and yourself to be used to the new norm. So don't go and buy whatever realestate.com says you can, or the bank says you can, or you've got this settlement and family are telling you you've got to do this. I really do believe it should take 12 months, and I do talk about that in my book. But if you don't come out with a settlement and, this is your new norm and you're starting from zero, this is where I sort of sit down and I start talking to my clients about, you've got to work out what your end goal is, you've got to work out what your not negotiables are, and you've got to work out what you're prepared to compromise with. And I suppose my not negotiable was, I didn't want to take my kids out of the community that they knew. I didn't want to take them out of the schools that they were going to. In one case was a private school in secondary, and the younger was in a public primary school. But, if my second child wanted to go to private school, what was I going to do? So I didn't want to take them out of the community. And as much as I had shame about renting, I had to rent in the same area. And that's what I did to stabilise the family. So that was my goal, and that was the not negotiable. But my compromise was going from a 40-odd square house down to a 2-bedroom unit, okay? That was the compromise. So I think along the way, regardless of what you can borrow or what you can't borrow, if you have the not negotiables and what you're prepared to compromise on, I think that's a very good starting space. Now, along the way, you will find out that, I can't, I either can't buy out my ex, or I can't rebuy in the area, because let's face it, you've just lost 50% or 60% or 70% of what you had. So the whole idea about compromise, well, I'm going to stay in the same community, so I'm prepared to rent here, but I have got a bucket of money here. I don't want to just put it in the bank and just let it fritter away, then you should start thinking about rent vesting. We are renting in the community that we want to, but we have a portion of money here and we perhaps can borrow money and we're actually going to buy an investment property where we can afford to. And I can assure you, there will always be an opportunity somewhere in Australia that you will be able to afford to purchase a property. And if you follow my strategies and you follow my not negotiables under, I have what's called a PIES formula: population, infrastructure, employment, supply and demand. If you follow that formula, you will be able to get a really good property that's going to do all the right things for you. So it comes down to not negotiables and what are you prepared to compromise on. I hope I answered that question fairly for perhaps the single people out there that have children, or even if you're a young adult. You know, a lot of my 20-year-olds are rent vesting. You know, they're still living at home or they've moved out of home, but they've actually got investment properties elsewhere because, you know, they did have a borrowing capacity, they did have a deposit, and they've gone and bought somewhere else. And, you know, I've got one guy that started with me at 21. He's 26 now, and he signed his third contract with me. So, you know, it can work.
Absolutely. And obviously, we're going to be putting all the details for people to connect with you a little bit later on, because each and every person's scenario and situation is completely different, and obviously you can't you know, be as wide as possible if you're gonna you know, be any help to anyone, because you can't be everything to everyone, you know. So that's something else. But you also mentioned something while you you know, when we're starting, and it's about financially fit families. Now this now seems to be a central to your mission, and you know, just your own track record just really showcases that family has been integral in everything that you have done, from the time that you started work to the marriage, and now also whatever it is that you are doing. So maybe in your own words, what does a financially fit family sort of mean to you, and how do you help families achieve this status?
Financially fit families to me is around the education of learning and understand that we live in a world where we need money, and we can't discount that fact, can we? But we need to understand what money is actually worth and what a dollar to us could mean something completely different to a dollar to somebody else. So when we think about financially fit families, you know, I do know I have been in a supermarket thinking, gosh, I have to put those things back because I can't afford to buy that this week. And it could have been a stable, you know, it wasn't the snacks, it wasn't, you know, the goody things, it could have been a stable. So I've stood in a supermarket line having to think, what can I afford to pay for this week? I don't want any of my clients to have to stand in a supermarket line and give groceries back. I want my clients to know that what they're preparing for today, tomorrow and their future, it's lessons learned, and they're going to be comfortable with what a dollar means to them and what they believe their living expenses and lifestyle expenses are going to equate to. You know, and you know, I've got clients that are happy with $50,000 a year. I've got clients that want $100,000, $150,000 or $200,000 a year to live on. There's no right or wrong answer there. It's their number. And as long as they can come up with a really good picture of what that number is, we work toward making sure that they can continually live the lifestyle that they want. Some compromises, because let's face it, if you're going to save money, you've got to compromise on something, and contribute to using property as the vehicle to give them the lifestyle that they want. Now, those lessons need to be ushered through the family. It is about the conversation at the dinner table. It is about, as your children get older and they become young adults, and what their responsibilities are going to be, what their liabilities are going to be, and what they're going to need. So when I talk about financially fit families, and I've talked about a generational business, when I have grandparents, parents, children, great-grandchildren in my world, we're teaching them the same lessons about money. And the money is what you want, what you need, what you should be grateful for, and how can you help and educate the rest of the family around this as well. And as I said, the number that you want to live on is your number, and there's no right or wrong, but we make sure that you're comfortable with it, and we work towards that financially fit family goal to make sure that everyone understands how this is going to work.
Absolutely. And, there's nothing as liberating or as rewarding as being able to just walk into a place and not look at the price, or just go in and just be able to really live, your life. And I don't think a lot of people are able to do that. And I suppose that's the same approach they also have to looking at property prices. I mean, obviously you have mentioned not to go onto realestate.com because all of those that are being showcased are not necessarily the right sort of, properties that fit the criteria that you're talking about. Now, for somebody who's maybe looking at those prices and thinking, I'll never be able to get into the property market. My grandmother didn't have a house. My my parents didn't even have, a property. Who am I to think I can have a property plus investments and things of that nature? Because it's that generational downpour that they're just looking at and thinking, who am I? So what are some of the initial steps that you'd recommend for somebody to build confidence and knowledge? As you have also mentioned, the more you know, the more you are actually risk averse when it comes to these sort of things.
I think the first thing is, once again, don't say I can't. And this is a stepping stone. This is a stepping process. I mean, in my instance, having a home was the goal because I didn't have one, remember? So that was my goal. Whereas there are other investments out there. And, let's face it, we have to teach our children that, if you are going to get a part-time job, what are you going to do with that money? And I think learning about what a dollar is worth and the value of it is the stepping stone. So, you may not be able to get a deposit or save money you start to save. You may not have the deposit to get the property that you want, but your stepping stone would be saving. Then the next stepping stone would be, can I borrow money? And if I can borrow money, how much money can I borrow? And whatever that is, well, then let's actually start looking at this as an investment. So some people get very confused with, they forget that investing in property is an investment. It's a vehicle. Property is the vehicle in this instance. So that's no different to saving money in a term deposit, or putting money into shares, or adding money to your superannuation, or there's incentives out there to round up the 2 and 3 cents into acorns, and that all of a sudden becomes saving. So it has to be a different mindset around. You can't just wake up one morning and say, I'm going to buy a house. There has to be a stepping stone, and the stepping stone is increment learnings and teachings and getting used to putting money aside for that vehicle. Okay, so it does start with savings, and that's where the conversation in the family, comes from. And, I used to have jars. I used to have jars for the mortgage repayment. I used to have jars for the groceries. I used to have jars for, if we could ever get a holiday, or, have a jar for the, buy the girls new toys or dresses or something. So fundamentally, we've got to get back to this fundamental of, if we've got $1, where does that dollar need to go? And, let's be grateful. We've got the opportunity, money's coming in, and it is simple as money coming in, less money going out. If money going out is more than the money coming in, you're going to get deeper and deeper and deeper into debt. We love credit, but we've got to understand what credit is, and there's no such thing as it's free. We've got to pay it back. So whenever we spend $1, if we've spent $1.20 and we're only making $1, we're already short. So financially fit families comes from learning about money, understanding your obligation when it comes to money. And it's just a tool. It's a vehicle. Money is a vehicle to get what you want. How do we do that? And I love talking about that. And the younger we teach our children, the better. But then, I was, well into my, 30s before I could do this again. So the time is right when you're ready. You have to have the mindset to have a not negotiable and a compromise. And when you have got that mindset, you're ready.
Absolutely. I'm glad you've mentioned that, because, so many of us are now really focused on the 4 easy payments. You just go into a place and it's like, you can have it today, 4 easy payments of X amount of dollars, and it sort of softened the blow. But then, if you look at it on a long enough timeline, you're literally, engaging in bad debt, which would actually stifle your growth in terms of, growing your portfolio. And obviously learning like that, is crucial. Now, you've mentioned that you've made mistakes and obviously you've recovered from them. And most mistakes, especially in real estate, are very costly mistakes. You were talking about lenders, insurance that would have maybe affected an income flow, but you've managed to have a system around it to, find the monetary value of that particular sort of fear that somebody might have, or the mistake that somebody might have. How do you maybe stay updated and maybe adapt your strategies to this ever evolving property market landscape? Because I think knowledge is what really stops a lot of people from progressing.
I suppose one of the biggest lessons I learned was don't listen to mainstream media. Mainstream media seem to get it wrong. Oh, well, not seem to, they do get it wrong. And the typical example here is we went into GFC, which is, that was 2008, I think, correct me if I'm wrong. And, properties were going to crash. It didn't actually happen. Okay, and then we went into COVID, and I'm actually going to use COVID as probably the biggest example. COVID came into play and we had our economists say that properties were going to drop by 50%. And that just absolutely horrified me, because that just won't happen in Australia. There's a couple of reasons why. Fundamentally, our five major banks with Bendigo Bank, we have this baseline of the debt stays with the actual person, and banks have so many risk-adverse policies put into play that even if property did drop by 50%, which will never happen in Australia, they've covered their backside. So economists were saying property was going to drop by 20, 30 and 50% because we went into COVID. And I voiced my opinion. I sent out so many videos saying, stop panicking, stop selling, this is not happening. And the one reason why economists got it wrong is as simple as everyone's got to put their head on a pillow. And in Australia, bricks and mortar and having a family home is such an innate want and need that we're not prepared to give up our home. We will do whatever it takes to keep it. Now, the economists got it wrong in the sense that property was going to drop. It didn't. It actually increased. Property around Australia during COVID increased anywhere between 20 and 25%, because people, we did live in a safe country. As much as we had COVID, we certainly lived in a safe country. And then we came out of COVID, and then all of a sudden interest rates went up. So a lot of people were buying, had mortgages 2%, 3%, or even some had them under 2%. And we were going into this big debt, and because interest rates weren't going up. Now, did the RBA get that wrong? Yes, they did. But I, once again, stood on my pedestal and said, what comes down must go up. Interest rates are going to go up. Now, I have to tell you, I was wrong. I didn't predict 13, but I actually predicted 6 or 7, and it continually went up. And of course, the underlying media kept on saying that there's going to be a crash in the market because people are just going to sell their homes because they can't sell it. Now, yes, Prosper, there were a portion of people that had to sell. They did have to sell. There was just no way out of it. But that percentage was nowhere near what economists predicted, because the next thing that they forgot about was people were not prepared to give up their family home. They went out and they went and got a second and third job just to meet the mortgage repayments so they wouldn't lose their home. So economists, as much as they deal in numbers, and I'm a numbers girl, they didn't have the empathy, and this is where I come in, they didn't have the empathy and the understanding that keeping your family home was an innate want, and it was a not negotiable, and they've done whatever they could to make sure that they've kept it. And the people that have stood the test of time and accepted, no one accepted the 13 interest rate increases, they're coming down, because what went down had to go up. What goes up has to come down. It is in that cycle. But economists got it wrong. They got it wrong at the GFC level. They got it wrong at the COVID level. They got it wrong at the interest rate level. And of course, economists spruik on the media, and the media want to hear all their stories. And people were making decisions based on people that didn't have empathy, and they made decisions based on the sensationalising of the media, and they sold. And people have come back to me and said, wish I hadn't sold, Christine. I'd be fine now. Yes, I know you would be. So, as I said, there's no right time to get in the market. There's no right property. The right time is now. If you can borrow money, you should be in the market and be prepared for the peaks and troughs, because there will be peaks and troughs. And so the one tip there, don't listen to mainstream media. They get it wrong. You'll be listening to mainstream media. This is the next boom area, and I can assure you I would have been putting clients into that area 18 months or 2 years before it even came to mainstream media, because of the research that I do, because population, infrastructure, employment, supply and demand, I know what's happening.
Absolutely. You make it sound as easy as pie. And for those that want to maybe have a piece of that pie, where can they go, Christine, on the internet to connect with you? And maybe, yes.
Yeah, so I am on Facebook, SmarterProperty Investing on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. My website is SmarterPropertyInvesting.com.au. I offer all of your listeners, anyone that comes into my world, a 30-minute complimentary conversation. They can ask me anything and I will answer their questions. In that 30 minutes, they will either decide that I've answered their questions. They may want to move forward and engage my services fully. And of course, once you engage my services fully, there's fee for service there. And I'm happy to have that conversation. But what you see is what you get. If you've got a question, I'm happy to answer it.
Absolutely. I'll make sure that all those links are in the show notes so that people can actually get started on that journey. Now, Christine, this has been quite a journey of yours. I mean, your life story and your experience have so much value for anyone that's really, really looking to consolidate, their investment portfolio, or to actually learn more without the false starts and the mistakes that they have. Now, you've invited people to come to have a chat with you, and let's just say hypothetically, amongst those people that rock up is 35-year-old Christine, who has just, undergone her 17 years of marriage, and things are not just looking quite as they were supposed to be. And she is quite shameful and embarrassed about renting in the area that she once called home and things of that nature. What would you tell that lady, knowing what you now know about the journey that you took and who you've become?
In your darkest moment, I strongly suggest that you seek help. Okay, in your darkest moment, I strongly suggest that you seek help. It may be a family member, it may be a friend, it may be a medical practitioner, but I strongly suggest that you seek help in your darkest moment. But understand your darkest moment will turn into the light. If you are looking for the right opportunities and you've got the right mindset, because you've accepted what the new norm is, and that's very hard. That doesn't happen overnight. But once you've accepted the new norm, the light is at the end of the tunnel. And it's at the dawn of the new norm that you can start making decisions. And it's really funny. You might find that, gosh, I'm 35 now and I can actually make my own decision. Someone else is not making it for me. So you will come into your own, but if you need help, certainly seek that help and get the right help there. But then understand there will be light at the end of the tunnel, and you will achieve what you want to achieve if you've got the right positive mindset. Yep.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you so much for that nuggets right there. And for those that are watching right now, obviously, if you're watching up until now, thank you very much, because Christine has just shared some invaluable insights on overcoming financial adversity and through the vehicle of property investing. Now, in the comments below, I want you to maybe let us know, have you ever faced maybe similar challenges or maybe considered property investing as a path to your own financial freedom? I want you to share your thoughts and your experience in the comments below. Would love to hear your story. Now, Christine, I can't thank you enough for the time that you spent with us on the conversation today. I mean, you've been in various media outlets. You contribute a lot to, the financial fabric of Australia. I've met you in many a networking event, and just the way you present as a person, nobody would even know, the depth that, you bring to the table. And now you showcased this journey on the Online Prosperity Show. But tell us, we're now in your world. You've roped us all in. What's next? What are you working on that we should be excited about? That we can rally behind and maybe contribute to what you're doing.
Actually, we fundamentally behind the scenes over the last couple of years, we've been trying to come up with some sort of platform or some sort of engagement about how to bring financial literacy into the education department. So we've developed sort of 50 questions originally we were looking at anywhere between 15 and 19-year-olds. And then we felt, no, when I find, you might be walking around the shopping centre, okay? And many years ago, my grandson, who is now 11, he was 3. And we were going out for breakfast, my daughters, and we were going out for breakfast. And I said, I'll get up and pay. And he goes, I pay, Gran. And he took my credit card and he knew what to do with it. Okay. And that freaked me out. So that was 8 years ago. That freaked me out to think that a 3-year-old knew that you had to pay, but you did it in this card. And so over the last 8 years, I just don't know how to teach financial literacy to children whereby we don't live in a cashless society. There's still cash around. But technically, when do you actually show your children what a dollar coin is, what a $2 coin is, what a $5 note is, what a 10, 20, 50, $100 note is? When do families today, in the modern family, when do they physically show their children money, the physical side of money? And so the younger our children are, and if you've got a 3-year-old, and I've seen 2-year-olds know how to tap now, when you've got that, how can they actually understand what money is? Yes, you talk about we've got to earn money, we go to work, we earn money, but they're not seeing the physical transaction, they're not seeing the touchy-feely. And so we're trying to think that it was 15 to 19-year-olds that needed financial literacy, but I'm beginning to think it needs to be our grade 5 and grade 6, because, you might get some pocket money, they're going to start maybe working part-time. What is it? So what we're fundamentally working on, we're trying to get answers from grade 5 and grade 6s. What does money mean to them? What do they think, when you get a wage, what is it? What does it mean? What does credit mean? Does it mean do you have to pay it back? How does money get in that card that you tap and go? So we're trying to do that, but believe it or not, along this journey, we've realised that there are adults out there that don't know, because we're coming into a cashless society, or we've actually come into a credit society whereby tap and go is the norm. And so I think we're fundamentally missing out on the tangible side of money. I sort of equate this to we come into a world whereby we may experience dyslexia. Every human being on this planet has a level of dyslexia. But our medical team have said that when we're born, we cry because we need food, and then eventually we learn what our hands do and we grab, and then eventually we can get up on our fours and we start to crawl, and then we start to walk, and then we start to run, and we have a language. Unless we take those steps physically in line with each other, a higher level of dyslexia can occur in our brain. So if we walk before we crawl, we've missed out on a big step of learning, and our brain going through the process of the steps. I feel that that's what's happening in our world today, whereby we're missing out on that step of the tangible part of money. And I feel that that's where financial literacy needs to be broken down and brought into our education system, because we've got, parents out there that have never been taught financial literacy. That how can they possibly have that conversation with their children if they don't understand it themselves? So what we're working on, we're trying to create financial fit families and understand money.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for that. Now, obviously, this is something that is affecting a lot of families and a lot of people. Like, I would maybe give a short example of how I was robbed of $11 by my then 4-year-old, without her realizing that she's actually committed an atrocity. All right, so the system has created it so much that they've gone past the real physical money. They've gone past the physical credit card. Now, with the apps that we have, just your face can literally get you to pay for certain things. So my little girl was playing a game and there was an upgrade that needed to happen that she had to pay $11 to. And it was a Sunday. I was just, sitting, relaxing with my wife. And then my little girl tapped me on the shoulder and she said, "Dad, look." I looked, my face got hit by the phone, and then I literally paid $11 from that. And she continued with her game. 2 days later, I get a notification. "Oh, thank you for your subscription. We're going to be doing this again." And I'm like, wait a minute. I didn't engage with this. Then I realized when the actual act had happened. Now, can you imagine things like that happening? And it's all in the fine print without people getting to know. And I can't wait to see what you're going to be doing with this financially fit thing, because I think it really needs to be addressed, because these little amounts compound and it becomes more and more and more. And before you know it, you're set in front of a mortgage broker trying to, get a pre-approval, and they tell you, "Sorry, it's not going to happen."
Exactly. So and your daughter didn't do anything wrong, but she didn't do anything wrong, but she didn't know what she was doing and what the impact was. So for every action, there's a reaction, and that's what we're missing. We understand we need money. We understand that they verbally understand that we need to pay for things, but they don't understand how that money got there in the first place. So there's all these nuances that we have to go back and start ticking the boxes. And do you understand that? Do you understand that? So it sounds fundamentally easy, but in actual fact, we really need to dumb it down. I can't express that anymore. We really need to dumb it down, because, how did that, Dad's face is going to let me do this, but it's money. So she knew what she was doing, and there was nothing wrong in what she was doing, but she didn't know the impact of what she was doing. And yes, she's 4, but then, she could be 24 and still doing the same thing, because we are in an age of technology whereby it's easy and there's no delayed gratification anymore, because we want it, we can have it today. We can have it this second. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, Christine,
I'm getting into philosophy now, so we shouldn't be doing that.
Absolutely
Okay.
value that. And that's the reason why we're going to put all those links so that people can continue these conversations with you in the show notes. Thank you so much for sharing your remarkable journey and wisdom that you've gained along the way. I mean, I obviously believe in life. We're here to live, to learn, and to contribute. And you've lived through all of these things that could have taken you aback, but you've used them as lessons, and now you're sending those lessons down the elevator for those that are looking to enhance their well-being and also raise financially fit families. I mean, your story is just a testament to resilience and the power of strategic investing, and I can't thank you enough for the time you spent with me on the call and the journey that you actually took.
You're very welcome, and I can't thank you, and your listeners are very welcome to reach out. Thank you, Prosper.
Fantastic. As you heard from Christine, if her story resonated with you and you're maybe contemplating a similar path, I encourage you to reach out to her for complimentary chat that she has offered. I'll definitely make sure that those links are in the show notes. And it's an opportunity for you to, if you've got any questions, for them to be answered. and to actually explore how property investment can fit into your financial goals. As Christine has said, it doesn't matter when you start. It's not about timing the market, but it's about time in the market. And while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe to the Online Prosperity Show for more inspiring stories and actionable insights like you just heard from Christine, because from what I hear in the next episode, we're going to be diving into ideas that could lead you to a happier existence. Until then, I encourage you to share this episode with somebody who could actually benefit from Christine's expertise. And I want you to remember that your journey to prosperity starts with a single step. This might just be it. Bye for now.